The House Judiciary Committee has introduced a sweeping piece of legislation that could significantly expand President Trump's executive authority. This bill, a cornerstone of the Republican legislative agenda, seeks to reshape the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches. It has sparked intense debate, with proponents hailing it as a necessary reassertion of congressional authority and critics decrying it as a dangerous power grab that could undermine democratic norms. This bill's introduction marks a pivotal moment in American politics. It reflects the culmination of years of Republican efforts to curtail the administrative state and bolster the presidency. The bill's fate hangs in the balance, with its passage far from certain. However, its introduction alone signals a potential shift in the political landscape. The bill's impact could be far-reaching, affecting everything from environmental regulations to antitrust enforcement. It could reshape the relationship between the federal government and the American people. The coming months will be crucial in determining the bill's trajectory and its ultimate impact on the nation. At the heart of this controversial legislation lies a series of bold proposals designed to empower the presidency. One of its most significant provisions is the incorporation of the REINS Act, a long-standing Republican priority. This act would require congressional approval for any new major regulation issued by federal agencies. Another key element of the bill is the consolidation of antitrust enforcement authority within the Department of Justice. This move would strip the Federal Trade Commission of its antitrust enforcement powers, centralizing this authority under the president's purview. The bill doesn't stop there. It also mandates a comprehensive review of existing federal regulations. Agencies would be required to submit their regulations to Congress for approval over a 5-year period. Any regulation that fails to garner congressional approval would be nullified. This provision is designed to expedite Trump's deregulatory agenda, potentially leading to the rollback of numerous regulations across various sectors. The REINS Act has been a central tenet of Republican efforts to curb what they perceive as regulatory overreach by the federal government. Proponents argue that the act is essential for restoring congressional authority and ensuring that major regulations have the support of elected representatives. They contend that the current regulatory process gives unelected bureaucrats too much power, allowing them to impose burdensome rules without sufficient oversight. Under the REINS Act, any new regulation with an estimated economic impact exceeding $100 million would require congressional approval to take effect. This provision would effectively give Congress veto power over a wide range of regulations, potentially slowing down the rulemaking process. Supporters believe this added layer of scrutiny is necessary to prevent overregulation and protect businesses from unnecessary burdens. Critics, however, argue that the REINS Act would politicize the regulatory process and cripple the government's ability to address critical issues. They contend that requiring congressional approval for major regulations would create a bureaucratic bottleneck, delaying the implementation of important safeguards for public health, safety, and the environment. The proposed transfer of antitrust enforcement authority from the FTC to the Department of Justice has also drawn sharp criticism. Proponents of this change, including some within the tech industry, argue that it would streamline antitrust enforcement and eliminate duplication of effort. They contend that having two separate agencies responsible for antitrust enforcement can lead to inconsistencies and conflicting approaches. However, opponents, including many consumer advocates and former FTC officials, warn that this consolidation of power would weaken antitrust enforcement and make it easier for corporations to engage in anti-competitive behavior. They argue that the FTC, as an independent agency, is better positioned to challenge powerful corporations without fear of political interference. Centralizing antitrust enforcement within the Department of Justice, they argue, would give the president undue influence over antitrust decisions. This raises concerns about potential conflicts of interest, particularly given Trump's personal and business ties to various industries. Section 5, Beyond Regulation, the GOP's broader policy agenda. This legislation represents just one piece of a much larger Republican policy agenda. The GOP is also pursuing significant changes to the tax code, immigration laws, and federal spending. These proposals, taken together, paint a clear picture of the party's priorities and its vision for the future of the country. On the tax front, Republicans are pushing to make permanent the individual tax cuts passed in 2017, which are currently set to expire at the end of 2025. They are also seeking to reduce corporate tax rates and simplify the tax code, arguing that these measures would boost economic growth and create jobs. In terms of immigration, the GOP is focused on strengthening border security, reducing legal immigration levels, and cracking down on sanctuary cities. They argue that these measures are necessary to protect national security, preserve American jobs, and uphold the rule of law. Section 6. Voices of Dissent. Critics raise concerns over power shift. The proposed legislation has sparked fierce opposition from a broad coalition of groups, including Democrats, consumer advocates, environmental organizations, and civil rights groups. They argue that the bill represents a dangerous assault on democratic norms, concentrating too much power in the hands of the executive branch. Critics contend that the REINS Act would effectively give Congress veto power over a vast swathe of federal regulations, crippling the government's ability to protect public health, safety, and the environment. They warn that this would lead to weaker environmental protections, fewer safeguards for consumers, and a rollback of crucial regulations in areas such as workplace safety and financial markets. The proposed consolidation of antitrust enforcement authority within the Department of Justice has also drawn sharp criticism. Opponents argue that this move would undermine the independence of antitrust enforcement, making it easier for corporations to engage in anti-competitive behavior without fear of meaningful consequences. Section 7. A chorus of support championing congressional authority. Despite facing staunch opposition, the bill has garnered enthusiastic support from Republicans, who argue that it is necessary to rein in an overreaching administrative state and restore the proper balance of power between the executive and legislative branches. Supporters of the REINS Act maintain that it would enhance democratic accountability by requiring congressional approval for major regulations. They contend that this would ensure that regulations have the support of elected representatives and reflect the will of the people. Proponents of consolidating antitrust enforcement argue that it would streamline the process, eliminate duplication of effort, and create a more efficient system. They maintain that having a single agency responsible for antitrust enforcement would provide greater clarity and consistency in the application of antitrust laws. Section 8. A legacy of gridlock, the REINS Act, and past battles. The REINS Act is not a new concept. It has been introduced in Congress numerous times over the past 2 decades, becoming a perennial point of contention between Republicans and Democrats. Despite passing the House of Representatives on multiple occasions, the REINS Act has consistently faced an uphill battle in the Senate, where Democrats have successfully blocked its passage. The repeated attempts to pass the REINS Act highlight the deep partisan divide over the role of government regulation. Republicans generally favor a more hands-off approach, arguing that excessive regulation stifles economic growth and hinders job creation. Democrats, on the other hand, tend to view government regulation as essential for protecting consumers, workers, and the environment. The current iteration of the REINS Act is likely to face a similar fate, as Democrats remain firmly opposed to its passage. However, the fact that it is included as part of a larger GOP policy package may give it more momentum than in previous years. Section 9. Charting the course. The bill's uncertain path forward. The fate of this controversial legislation remains uncertain. While it has garnered enough support to pass the House Judiciary Committee, its path forward is fraught with obstacles. Democrats are united in their opposition, and it is unclear whether the bill can garner enough support in the Senate to overcome a filibuster. Even if the bill were to pass both chambers of Congress, it would likely face a legal challenge. Critics argue that the REINS Act is unconstitutional, as it would give Congress an improper legislative veto over executive branch actions. Despite the challenges ahead, the introduction of this bill marks a significant development in the ongoing battle over the size and scope of government. It reflects the deep partisan divisions that continue to shape the American political landscape. The coming months will be crucial in determining the bill's fate and its ultimate impact on the nation.